All right, so are you ready for this one? Because today's deep dive, um, it's a wild one. We're going to crack open this account. 7 Soviets. And trust me, it's not your average history lesson. Imagine this, okay. A Cub Scout, just minding his own business, stumbles into what seems like an international incident. I mean, we're talking Cold War intrigue, a healthy dose of misunderstanding, and a whole lot of you can't make this stuff up moments.
What I think is so fascinating here is how this story, on the surface, it seems almost comical, right? But it offers this really unique glimpse into the human side of the Cold War,
Hmm.
a period many people just associate with, you know, political maneuvering,
Right.
the looming threat of nuclear war.
Right, the stakes don't get much higher. Okay, so let's set the scene. This Cub Scout is leaving the library, heading to meet his dad. Just another normal day. Right, wrong. A man approaches him and says, wait for it, I surrender. I am Russia.
And you have to remember, especially for those maybe less familiar with the era, but this was a time of immense tension between the US and the Soviet Union. Like, the fear of espionage was palpable. So for a young boy in, Cold War America, this encounter, it would have been nothing short of unsettling.
Totally. And it gets better. The man goes on to say there are 7 in all, and they want to surrender to the scout's father.
Yeah.
What would you even do in that situation? I mean, talk about a story to tell in school.
I know, it's incredible. I mean, the sheer improbability of 7 Soviet sailors surrendering to a Cub Scout
Yeah.
in a post office parking lot of all places, it really highlights the absurdity of the situation,
Right.
right? The cultural and language barriers at play.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of a movie. So they're in the parking lot. This kid is probably thinking he's single-handedly won the Cold War. And then what? They just march into the post office and demand to see someone in charge.
Well, not quite. They actually called the police. But even that doesn't go exactly as you might expect. The sailors specifically requested a grand show of force. Sirens, flashing lights, the whole 9 yards.
Wait, seriously? They wanted a full-blown police escort. What were they thinking?
It speaks to their desperation, I think. These weren't like hardened spies trying to blend in. They wanted to make sure everyone knew they were surrendering. They even get down on their knees in front of the Cub Scout.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine. But this begs the question. Who were these guys? Were they actually dangerous? I mean, what were they running from?
That's where it gets really interesting. These weren't KGB agents or high-ranking officials. They were ordinary sailors who had jumped ship near the port, choosing this risky bid for freedom over whatever awaited them back home.
Wow. Just regular guys who decided they'd rather take their chances with a Cub Scout than stay on board. There's got to be more to it than that. They were desperate enough to swim a mile in icy water to reach the shore.
Exactly. Think about the desperation that must have driven them to such lengths. This wasn't a joyride. It was a carefully calculated risk, a leap into the unknown.
So we have this stunned Cub Scout, 7 Soviet sailors at his feet. What happens next?
Well, the police arrive. And it's just as chaotic and bizarre as you might imagine. But before we get into that, I think it's important to step back for a moment and consider the historical context a bit more. Defecting during the Cold War, I mean, it was incredibly risky. These sailors were literally choosing between potential imprisonment back home and an uncertain future in a new country.
Wow. That puts a whole new spin on things. It's easy to get caught up in the absurdity of this story.
Yeah.
This was a life-altering decision for those sailors. It's like they say, truth is stranger than fiction. You couldn't make this stuff up if you tried. But it does make you wonder, what exactly did they hope to find in America?
That's a question worth pondering. The Cold War, so often it was framed as this ideological battle, right? But for these sailors, it might have been about something much more fundamental. Freedom, opportunity, maybe even just a chance to start over.
So the police arrive, sirens blazing, just like the sailors ordered. What's the scene like? Can you imagine being a bystander witnessing this?
Oh, it must have been quite a spectacle. According to the account, a crowd gathered, drawn by all the commotion. And you have to remember, this was a time when, fear and suspicion ran high. The sight of Soviet sailors surrendering in such a public way, it would have been shocking and confusing, to say the least.
Okay, so we've got the sailors, the Cub Scout, the bewildered police officers, and now a crowd of onlookers. What happens next? Do the sailors even speak English? How do they communicate?
See, that's another layer of the story that highlights just how unusual it was. There were very clear language barriers, which, just added to the confusion and, frankly, the humor of the situation. It's a good reminder that beyond all the politics and the ideologies, there were real people involved here, trying to navigate this impossible situation.
Almost like a comedy of errors, but with incredibly high stakes. This poor Cub Scout is caught in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
What was going through his mind?
It's hard to say for sure, but you have to imagine it was a lot for a young boy to process. One minute he's leaving the library, the next he's accepting the surrender of 7 Soviet sailors. It speaks to the strange reality, I think, of growing up during the Cold War, where these global anxieties infiltrated everyday life.
Absolutely. And it makes you realize how our understanding of events is shaped by our own perspectives. Here's this Cub Scout probably thinking he stumbled into a scene from a spy thriller, while these sailors are just desperate to escape a life they no longer want.
Precisely. The story, as absurd as it may seem, it reminds us that history isn't just about, treaties and wars. It's about individual lives shaped by the currents of their time.
It's a powerful message. But let's get back to those sailors. What happened to them after they surrendered?
Well, they were taken into custody, of course, but instead of being treated like, hardened criminals or dangerous enemies, they were actually met with a surprising amount of compassion.
Compassion. I wouldn't have expected that given the political climate at the time.
Right. It's another detail that challenges our assumptions about the Cold War. And the people who are caught in its web, remember, these were ordinary men who took an extraordinary risk. And while their actions had these, very real political implications, their motivations seem to have been deeply personal.
So they weren't trying to defect to get state secrets or anything like that. They just wanted a different life.
That seems to be the case. And while their story is unique, it speaks to, I think, a larger truth about that era. Behind the Iron Curtain, there were countless individuals who were yearning for freedom, opportunity, a life beyond the confines of this restrictive system.
It really makes you think about the human cost of these global conflicts. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines and forget that there are real people caught in the middle, making impossible choices. It really puts things in perspective. It's a stark reminder that history isn't always about, superpowers and ideologies. It's about individuals caught in the middle, making these impossible choices.
Absolutely. And it challenges us to kind of look beyond the headlines,
Yeah.
and consider the human stories that often just get lost in these grand narratives of history, these sailors driven to such desperate measures. I mean, it highlights the very real personal struggles hidden behind the Cold War's political facade.
Right, and it makes you wonder about the countless other untold stories from that era, the ordinary people caught in the crosshairs of global politics, making these life-altering decisions in the face of extraordinary circumstances.
Exactly. It's a reminder that history is made up of, individual choices and actions, each with its own ripple effect. And while we may never know the full story of those 7 sailors, their experience serves as this powerful lens through which to view the human impact of the Cold War.
Yeah, it's true. This whole story, it's like a time capsule. It's not just about this bizarre encounter in a parking lot. It's a snapshot of a particular moment in time, capturing the anxieties, the hopes, and the very human stories that unfolded against the backdrop of the Cold War.
Yeah, it reminds us that even in the midst of all these global tensions, everyday life goes on. People fall in love, they chase their dreams, and they navigate the complexities of their circumstances, often in extraordinary ways.
Their story is a testament to that human resilience, isn't it? They risked everything for a chance at a better life.
It certainly is. And it's a story that continues to resonate today, I think, reminding us of the power of individual choice, the importance of empathy, and that enduring human desire for freedom.
Well said. This deep dive has been quite a journey. It's amazing how a single account, like 7 Soviets, can unlock so much about history and the human spirit.
It's a perfect example of how digging beneath the surface of even the most unusual events can reveal these really profound insights and challenge our understanding of the world.
It's a powerful reminder to stay curious, to question what we think we know, and to always look for the human element in every story, because sometimes truth is stranger and far more illuminating in fiction.
Well said. And that's what makes exploring these stories so endlessly fascinating.
That's for sure. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.